When people think about freedom, they often imagine political rights, money in the bank, or the ability to choose their lifestyle. But for Friedrich Nietzsche, the 19th century German philosopher, freedom was not something external that society could hand to you. It was not about being free from laws or free to chase pleasures. For Nietzsche, true freedom was something deeper, harder, and more terrifying. It was the liberation of the spirit from illusions, from the comforting lies of morality, religion, and social expectation. Freedom, in Nietzsche's sense, meant breaking away from the prison of good and evil and daring to live beyond it. But what does that actually mean? And why should we, in the modern age of anxiety, social media, and conformity, still care about what Nietzsche had to say? To answer that, we need to walk into his world, his struggles, and his revolutionary vision for what it means to be free. Nietzsche was born in 1844, in Rocken, a small village in Prussia. From the beginning, his life was marked by fragility. His father, a Lutheran pastor, died when Nietzsche was only 5 years old. He was raised in a household surrounded by women, his mother, grandmother, and aunts. As a child, he was brilliant but frail, plagued by illnesses that would haunt him his entire life. By the age of 24, he was a professor of classical philology, one of the youngest in Europe. But while his academic career was impressive, Nietzsche was never content to simply analyze the past. He wanted to rip apart the present. His philosophical journey was shaped by three powerful influences: ancient Greek tragedy, the music of Richard Wagner, and the shocking realization that religion was losing its grip on the modern world. Nietzsche saw that Europe was entering an age of skepticism. Science, reason, and the Enlightenment had pushed faith to the margins. But while many people celebrated this, Nietzsche felt something darker looming. Without God, without the moral framework of Christianity, what would happen to people's values? He described this moment with one of his most famous phrases, "God is dead." But he did not mean that God literally died. He meant that belief in God, which had been the foundation of Western morality, was collapsing. And once that foundation crumbled, society would be left adrift, searching for meaning in a world that no longer had a divine order. For Nietzsche, this wasn't just a historical event. It was an existential crisis. People who once relied on the authority of religion to tell them what was right and wrong, good and evil, would suddenly have to face the terrifying task of creating their own values. And here lies the core of his philosophy, the need to go beyond good and evil. But this was not an invitation to chaos. Nietzsche was not telling people to simply reject morality and live selfishly. Instead, he was pointing out that traditional morality, especially the Christian morality of his time, was built on a system that crushed human vitality, creativity, and strength. Nietzsche divided morality into two types: master morality and slave morality. Master morality, he said, arose from the strong, the noble, and the powerful. For these people, good meant qualities like strength, courage, vitality, and self-affirmation. Bad meant weakness, cowardice, and mediocrity. Slave morality, on the other hand, came from the oppressed, the powerless, and the resentful. For them, good meant humility, meekness, obedience, and pity, while evil was everything associated with strength and dominance. In Nietzsche's view, Christianity had taken the values of the weak and turned them into universal morality, labeling strength as dangerous and weakness as virtuous. This, Nietzsche argued, had suffocated humanity's potential, keeping people small, fearful, and chained to illusions. To move beyond good and evil, Nietzsche believed, one had to reject these inherited moral codes and create values for oneself. He introduced the idea of the Übermensch, the Overman or Superman. This was not a comic book hero, but a metaphor for the person who dares to live authentically, who creates meaning in a meaningless universe. The Übermensch is someone who is not bound by traditional morality but who crafts his own path, embracing life with all its pain and beauty. This vision was Nietzsche's radical alternative to the nihilism he feared would consume Europe. But why does this matter today? Because, in many ways, we are living the very crisis Nietzsche foresaw. Traditional religion has declined in many parts of the world. People no longer look to God for meaning. But in its place, we have filled the void with consumerism, technology, social media, and shallow ideologies. Many of us define ourselves by likes, follows, or the approval of others. We obey the morality of the crowd, terrified of being judged or cancelled. Nietzsche would say that we are still living as slaves, not to Christianity anymore, but to society's expectations and digital illusions. True freedom, he would remind us, is not found in obeying the herd but in having the courage to live according to your own values, even if it means standing alone. Nietzsche's own life reflects both the brilliance and the cost of this path. He was a man of immense intellect but also immense suffering. His health deteriorated throughout his life. He endured crippling migraines, near blindness, and isolation. His friendship with Wagner collapsed, leaving him bitter and alone. His books were often ignored or ridiculed during his lifetime. In 1889, he suffered a mental breakdown on the streets of Turin and spent the final decade of his life in insanity, cared for by his mother and sister. He died in 1900, almost unknown. And yet, the seeds he planted would grow into one of the most influential legacies in philosophy, art, literature, and psychology. Think about how his ideas reshaped the world. Writers like Dostoevsky and Kafka wrestled with his vision of a world without God. Psychologists like Freud and Jung drew inspiration from his exploration of the human will and the unconscious. Existentialists like Sartre and Camus carried forward his call to create meaning in a meaningless universe. Even in popular culture, echoes of Nietzsche appear everywhere, from the dark heroes of modern cinema to the obsession with personal authenticity and breaking free from conformity. But Nietzsche's philosophy is not easy or comfortable. To go beyond good and evil is not to simply say, I can do whatever I want. That would be nihilism, the very thing he warned against. True freedom requires responsibility. It requires the courage to face the abyss, the honesty to admit that there is no cosmic script, and the strength to write your own. Nietzsche asked people to embrace what he called that eternal recurrence, the idea that you should live your life in such a way that you would be willing to repeat it, exactly as it is, over and over for eternity. Imagine the weight of that. Would you still make the same choices, chase the same desires, and waste the same hours if you knew you had to relive them endlessly? For Nietzsche, this was the ultimate test of freedom, to live so fully, so authentically, that you could say yes to life, even with all its suffering. And suffering, for Nietzsche, was not something to avoid but something to embrace. He believed that greatness is forged through struggle. What does not kill me makes me stronger, he wrote, a phrase that has become a cliché today but in his philosophy carried deep meaning. Pain, hardship, and loss are not enemies but necessary companions on the path to becoming who you truly are. Modern culture often sells us comfort as the highest good, ease, convenience, pleasure without pain. Nietzsche would call this the morality of the herd, the path of mediocrity. True freedom requires embracing discomfort, chaos, and struggle, because it is through them that you grow beyond the limits imposed by society and by yourself. This message resonates powerfully in our own time. Think about how many people feel trapped in jobs they hate, in relationships that suffocate them, in social pressures that demand conformity. Nietzsche's call is not to rebel blindly, but to ask yourself, whose values am I living by? Are they mine, or are they imposed on me? Am I pursuing my true path, or am I obeying the morality of the herd? To go beyond good and evil is to take back the authorship of your life. It is to declare that you will not live according to the labels others give you, good, bad, right, wrong, but that you will define your own standards and live courageously by them. But make no mistake, Nietzsche did not think this path was for everyone. He knew that most people would remain within the safety of herd morality, clinging to rules and conventions. The path of true freedom was for the few, the strong, the brave, the creative. This is why his philosophy has often been misunderstood, even abused. His concept of the Übermensch, for example, was distorted by his sister Elizabeth, who was sympathetic to Nazi ideology, and later twisted by the Nazis themselves to justify their perversions of power. But Nietzsche himself despised nationalism, racism, and anti-Semitism. His call for the Übermensch was not about domination over others but about mastery over oneself. So what does Nietzsche's guide to true freedom look like for us, practically speaking? It begins with honesty, the courage to see through illusions. This means questioning the moral codes you've inherited, the beliefs you've never examined, and the habits you live by unconsciously. It means recognizing when you are obeying out of fear rather than out of choice. It means asking, do I really believe this, or am I just afraid of what people will think if I don't? Next, it requires creativity, the willingness to invent new values. Nietzsche often spoke of life as a work of art, and he believed that each person should live as an artist, shaping their existence into something beautiful and meaningful. This doesn't mean everyone has to be a painter or writer. It means treating your life as a canvas, refusing to let it be painted by someone else's hand. Finally, it requires courage, the strength to live with the consequences of your freedom. To go beyond good and evil means there is no safety net, no divine guarantee that your choices are right. You must be willing to live with uncertainty, with risk, with failure. But it is in this very risk that life becomes real. Nietzsche would say that only in facing the abyss do we find our wings. When you look at the world today, with its noise, its distractions, its endless moral battles, Nietzsche's words are as urgent as ever. We see people divided into camps, each side shouting about what is good and what is evil. We see social media amplifying herd mentality, pressuring people to conform or be cast out. We see individuals drowning in nihilism, unable to find meaning in a world where traditional beliefs have collapsed. And yet, Nietzsche offers us a challenge, to stop waiting for someone else to give us the answers, and to take the terrifying but exhilarating step of creating our own. True freedom is not easy. It demands sacrifice. It demands loneliness at times. It demands the courage to live without the safety of absolute certainty. But if you take that path, if you dare to go beyond good and evil, you will discover what Nietzsche believed was the highest calling of humanity, to become who you truly are. So ask yourself, am I living by the morality of the herd, or am I carving my own path? Do I cling to the comfort of inherited values, or do I dare to create my own? Nietzsche's guide to true freedom is not a manual with easy steps. It is a call to courage, to honesty, and to creativity. It is an invitation to stop hiding behind good and evil and to step into the vast, terrifying, and beautiful responsibility of freedom. And perhaps that is why Nietzsche remains so haunting, so inspiring, even today. Because deep down, we know he is right. We know that life is short, fragile, and uncertain. We know that comfort and conformity will never make us truly alive. And we know that if we want to taste freedom, we must have the courage to go where few dare to go, beyond good and evil.